So we are in the midst of, or at the end of, a series of talks. As you know, we've been looking at how do we create the life that we want. Essentially what boils down to. In our tradition, it's very common in the first month of the year, we go back to sort of basics. What does science of mind teach us? How do we apply it in our daily living? And for me, it comes down to creating the life we want. So we've been using as a basis of material a wonderful new book called E Squared by Pam Grout. And she talks about 9 do-it-yourself energy experiments that prove your thoughts create your reality. Now, as I've said before, none of this is breaking news to us. Everybody knows this today. I remember in the olden days, it was in the 80s, I believe, when I came into a Center for Spiritual Living and I took what we called in those days Science of Mind 1. Very original term. I don't know where they came up with it. And I remember we spent 3 weeks talking about affirmation. This radical idea of affirming what you want, right? Now you go into any class, any workshop, any sales seminar, anything, they're going to talk to you about the power of affirmation, right? So that's just in our world. So the fact that you as an individual have the capacity to influence your life is not breaking news. The real question is, do you believe it? Do you really, really believe it? Oh, yes. Now, I find, unlike the enlightened souls in the room, to an extent I do. I am perfectly willing to take credit for everything that works in my life. And then I spent the last week being human and experiencing less than my perfect health and well-being, taking Linda's advice to do 40 days of medication. So I can blame the Super Bowl errors on just being in a foggy mind. I don't know what her excuse is. But, and then I want to make that about that out there. That happened to me, right? I didn't create that. That happened to me. You see, so that's where we go. We're powerful, co-creative beings creating the life we want as long as it's all good. And then when it's not, we're like, well, sheesh. Those are the moments we long for the devil, right? Can we have that back? Can we have that part back for a moment, right? So we've been looking at some basic ideas, and what Pam Grout does beautifully is puts into common, fun language what Ernest Holmes wrote so beautifully 4 years ago. And we started the month with this idea that there is a field of infinite possibility, that there are potentiality, if you prefer, that there's a divine intelligence and infinite wisdom that is everywhere present, always available, that is creating out of itself. Now, in some traditions, they call that God, or the many names for God. For those that don't like God, they like energy. I am of the opinion that it doesn't care. It's not going to be offended or not offended, whatever you choose to call it, right? Because it's just being. And so there is an infinite intelligence, an infinite wisdom, a divine energy that is the very source and substance of all that is. In scientific terms, they talk about a big bang, that somehow there was a moment when creation happened, and it continues to evolve. Each of the religions give us different versions of a creation story. Most of us are familiar with the beginning in Genesis of that in the beginning there was nothing, and the divine had an idea of itself called light. It said, "Let there be light." And lo and behold, light happened. And then that was exciting and cool, so I said, wonder what else is possible. And through every idea that the divine held, it came into being. Now this for us is a metaphor of the creative process, of how it works. It was not an isolated historic event, because if you think about it, who wrote that down, right? I didn't even show up till day 3 or 4, so you know. Right? So Let's just assume that it's a metaphor for creation that is ongoing. And so what we begin to realize is that there's a divine creative intelligence that is expressing and revealing itself in and as all of creation as this physical universe, then you and I, my friends, are individualized points of energy, of consciousness within that whole. And therefore, we looked at the second week is that we are a part of the field. We are a part of this energy. And so we have the capacity to be co-creative beings with this divine intelligence. Now, what we are learning, what science is telling us, what quantum physics is telling us, is what the ancient masters have told us for many, many years. That our own individualized consciousness influences that larger intelligence and brings about effects in our lives. So we then get to decide. And the decision is not whether you're going to be a co-creative being. That decision was made. And you get no vote. You are. It comes with the package. The question becomes, will I be conscious or unconscious about the creation? And so we get to the week 3 where we learn that what we focus on becomes our experience. What we focus on expands. Have you noticed this? That where your attention is, that is what your experience becomes. And so often we do it unconsciously, subconsciously. We don't think about what it is, the seeds that we are planting. We don't think about the thoughts that we are permeating the universe with. And then, just to top it all off, we act surprised when the thing that we have planted shows up in our life. We're like, oh, well, how did that happen? Very simple terms. I think about, it's like if I spent, spring is coming, yes? Yes. Affirm with me, spring is coming. And we go and we dig our gardens and we plant our seeds and we plant pea seeds, and then somewhere in the summer we go out to our garden, we go, oh my God, there's peas in my garden. They're everywhere. What happened? Right? If you said that to your neighbor, they would think you were crazy. And yet, I have been guilty myself of saying, I cannot believe that the thing that I have feared the most has come upon me. My brother Job, right? That which I feared the most has come upon me. How did that happen? It happened because the field of potentiality is impartial. I was sharing earlier, and I've shared this story many times, but I like it because it's simple. And it's the simple story. My mom worked for many, many years for a lovely little company called Perky Pet Products. I share this story with you, one, because I love to say Perky Pet Products. And don't get that many opportunities, oddly enough. But two, because at Perky Pet Products, this great American success story, brilliant idea, garage idea that became this multi-million gazillion dollar business. But at Perky Pet Products, they had a plastic injection machine. Second largest plastic injection machine in the whole state of Colorado, home of the Denver Broncos. I don't want to influence you in any way. I just want you to vote impartially. I'm just saying. And what they did with this is all of the parts that are needed for a hummingbird feeder, you all have hummingbird feeders, you know what they look like, are made with one machine. They produce all day long all of these parts. What they change, however, is the mold. So if you need a bee guard or if you need a cup, then you put in that mold, but the machine stays the same. And I have this appreciation because I am simple-minded. Like that is sort of how the universe works, isn't it? That the machine produces according to its own kind. But we are co-creative by the mold that we choose to insert. And then the production looks like the mold that we have produced. Now, unfortunately, most of this is happening subconscious, right? But as we are becoming more conscious, we are bringing up into our awareness those limiting beliefs, and we are beginning to understand that what we are thinking about or what we are focusing on expands, and that, of course, we live in an accommodating universe. Think about if you go online and you just say, I need some accommodations. And the little machine says, how many beds, how it's size, how many stars to your hotel, what do you want? And you punch all that stuff in, and it comes up and produces for you the perfect accommodations for what you've just told it. So too does this universe say, let me accommodate your belief system. Jesus said to us very eloquently, it is done unto you as you believe. I always joke with them about, I wish he had said, it's done unto you as I believe. Because clearly Jesus had it going on, you know? It's like, I'll go with that. I'll go with your program, man. That's working. But it is accommodating us according to our belief. Not playing favorites, not rewarding, not punishing, but simply unfolding according to our own conscious or unconscious belief. So how do we change this? Rereading a wonderful book called The Millionaire Course by Mark Allen. And Mark Allen was a struggling actor, musician, writer, author, person. Talks about struggling to make his $69 a month rent payment in a very not nice part of town. Wishing he could give his gift, wanting to do that, and at some point in the journey began to realize that his struggle was not about the circumstances around him, but rather was about his own inner way of being. And so he began to realize that if he wanted his life to be different, he would have to be different. And so he began to appreciate affirmation, and he began to collect all these gems of wisdoms that he was working with and reading about. And here's a little piece of information. Not only collect these pieces of wisdom, but practice them. I know. That's what I said. What? And so somewhere, his finances were out of control. He was in debt. He was struggling to be an artist, to be a musician, to be a writer. And somewhere he heard that you must figure out what it is you want. And he began to envision and affirm for himself a large white house on the hill in Marin County. Now, those of us that know Marin County know you do not get that for $69 a month. Yes, $69,000 a month maybe, you know. And so he began to envision this possibility. He began to work with this thing, and he came up with this wonderful affirmation, and it says, I am sensible and in control of my finances. I am creating total financial success in an easy and relaxed manner, in a healthy and positive way, in its own perfect time, and for the highest good of all. Nice, huh? Some of you are going to borrow that, aren't you? I'll be getting all kinds of emails tomorrow. What was that again? And so he began, I am sensible and powerful and in control of my finances. And then he says this. He says, a fascinating thing began to happen. See, he didn't do it once. He did it every day. He wrote it down all kinds of places. He put it everywhere he went so he would remind himself and say that, envisioning this house on the hill in Marin County. He said a fascinating thing began to happen. My thought patterns began to change. And I began to see the same ways I was really sensible and in control of my finances. You know, he goes on to say, it's not really rocket science when you think about it. Kind of the secret is make more than you spend, live according to your means. You know, that's kind of the difference, right? And so he was like, well, that's kind of sensible. That kind of makes sense. I'm in control of that. Because it turns out, here's a lesson, we spend our money. I can't believe my financials fair. Who spent all your money? Oh, okay. So he began to feel sensible and in control of his finances. And then it says another surprising thing began to happen. Rather than being overwhelmed by his debt and all the difficulties of having to start a business, he opened up to see new possibilities. You see, always the shift in thinking has to occur before the shift in circumstances will ever happen. He envisioned and could see himself living in this wonderful, spacious house, white house on a hill in Marin County. And he saw himself having time and the means to live a full life. He saw himself being successful. He affirmed for himself exactly what I've just told you. And lo and behold, his thought patterns began to change. And when his thought patterns began to change, he began to see possibility. And what he goes on to say is, he began to see in adversity the seed of new possibility. You see, some of us, I won't name names, but I know you're in the room because you're standing on stage. Want to say when adversity shows up on your doorstep, wah, 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 right? Instead of seeing that there's a possibility that is saying, here I am. And so when we can begin to change our inner core belief, which is a practice, my friends. Somebody said to me just recently, I don't understand this. Sometimes my life works and then it stops. And I said, so what was different? Right? And if we are to examine, sometimes we have spent many years in one way of thinking. We've created a habitual way of thinking, and then we say, oh, well, Marty says, have this happy little thought. I'll try that once. And maybe if you do it with a little enthusiasm, something shows up, and you're like, that was cool. And then day 2, you're like, well, I did it. I did that once. And life's back to its normal self. You see, it takes practice until that new way of thinking becomes our habitual way. And we begin to know that because we're not dismayed by appearance. Things happen, we go, wow, wonder what new possibilities trying to emerge. So in this wonderful book, Pam Grout is giving us opportunities to practice these thought experiments. So we were in a board meeting, leadership council meeting recently, and we finally got all the bills in from the remodel and all of the costs and everything. And for the first time in the history of humanity, it turns out we went over budget on a remodel. It's never been heard of in the history of humanity, right? So we were looking at that. It creates some opportunity for us to even further increase our abundance. And so one of our wonderful board members, Jerry, says to us, so let's just manifest it. I heard in church somewhere that we could use our thought to create the conditions that we want. And so, rather than just create that little bit, why don't we just set an intention to create $50,000? Let's give ourselves a month. Let's create $50,000. Now, you should know Jerry lives a prosperous life. She practices this on a daily basis. So I was like, yeah, I'm in. Sunday. Tuesday morning, doing a little wedding here, really sweet, intimate little group, just us. And so we do the wedding. It was sweet. And they give me the paperwork, and there's an envelope. And in the envelope, there's two certificates, not gift certificates, marriage certificates, they're called. One they get to keep, one goes to the city, state, county, whoever, I don't know, decides these things. And then there's some other paperwork in there, so I pulled it out and said, well, you probably want this. And one was a receipt, apparently for whatever they charged for getting a marriage license. And then there's another check in there. And the check is made out for $53,000, $759.84. I know, hello. That's the good news. The bad news is it's only a copy of a check and it's made out to somebody else. But But nobody can figure out where this check came from. So, I'm just saying. So now we're working on, okay, let's clarify the thinking. Salt Lake Center for Spiritual Living, original check, cashable, right? But isn't that a great reminder, right? So I just thought, well, it was a fun story I should share with you because it does work. Now, we're going to keep enhancing. So anybody that wants to be in this experiment with me, I'm good. Like, wouldn't that be fun just to get everything paid off and put some money in the bank and just move forward to the next level so we can keep doing all the wonderful things that we're all about here? So, my friends, you are more powerful than you today recognize. I don't care who you are. Some of us have been practicing the world. We're more powerful than we believe we are. And the way we experience that greater power, that greater possibility, is by working to uncover and release those limiting beliefs, to replace them with affirmative beliefs, and then to pay attention to what is showing up in our life that affirms the new truth and reality. The universe celebrates our greater good. We get to do the work, the inner work, over and over, deeper and deeper, until we just walk through life knowing it is all for our good, it is all for our unfoldment. So wherever you are on this journey, I invite you to avail yourself of the many opportunities here to reinforce that greater possibility for you. It works better in group, I've decided, right? It's a good thing. We are blessed. So know that you are blessed, and let us pray together. Simply recognizing and knowing this divine intelligence, this infinite wisdom, this divine essence that is expressing through as all that is. We open our hearts and our minds in this moment to reveal this divine truth, to allow it to be expressed more fully, more joyously through us and as us. I'm giving thanks this day for the many blessings in our lives, the gift of wholeness and well-being, the gifts of beauty and vitality, the gifts of joy and abundance, the gifts of love and nurturing relationship. And so I'm simply affirming and knowing for each of us gathered here that this one life is expressing itself for its highest good through us right now, awaiting our recognition of it. And so I name this good. I give thanks that this is so. I simply allow us to be blessed beyond measure and to extend a blessing from this place. We bless this community. We bless our friends, our brothers and sisters around the planet. We're holding the place for a world that works for everyone, for a planet at peace, and in truth, a planet that works for all. We extend a blessing, blessing all priests, rabbis, ministers, teachers of every faith, for we know that there are many pathways to the divine. We honor and celebrate them all. Knowing this to be so, I simply give thanks. I allow it to be so, as together we say, and so it is.